The Panthers have a lot of responsibility coming up. They got a lot of things they need to fix. I mean, we've been over the problems a lot. I think maybe their highest rate of difficulty, but also their biggest place to make a gigantic leap is how they handle Brian Burns. The most important personnel decision that the Panthers will make in the next 12 months is what they do with Brian Burns, and they have the rest of the season just to plan. Right, just to spitball, because once you don't trade him at the deadline, there's really nothing you can do until the offseason. So you have the rest of the year to evaluate, to learn, to grow, to pay attention, and to come up with your entire array of options and then decide which one you want to execute. And here's why I say it is this important. ESPN, right, because the ESPN's looking at the league just like we do. I'm talking ESPN.com. Once you get past the trade deadline, the next big moving and shaking moment outside of, a couple of free agents that might sign or a couple of releases that might happen, which, by the way, Michael Carter, former North Carolina running back, picked up by Arizona on waivers. Throckmorton was picked up, I believe, by the Titans after he was put on waivers, released by the Panthers. ESPN recognizes after the trade deadline there's not a lot of movement. So they put out a list of the top free agents this offseason. They put out a list of the most desirable free agents that are scheduled to be free agents this upcoming offseason. And wouldn't you guess who was number one, numero uno, top of the top, gold medalist? Saquon, no, I'm kidding. It was Brian Burns. It was Brian Burns.
Swerved me there.
It was Brian Burns. The number one free agent on the entire market this offseason is a Panther. Name me something else in the NFL right now that they are number one in.
Draft pick?
No, they're not right now.
I know.
They're close. They're not number one. The most recent team to have a punt return touchdown? Like, you got to get real specific.
I mean, worst record, number one for worst record in the NFL.
You have to... Yeah, true. You have to dive into like an ESPN stat, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're number one in the league on overcast days in the month of November that have rain in the forecast and have a left-handed quarterback as a backup, right? Like, ESPN has the really specific stats.
Crazy, yeah.
To find anything else, the Panthers are number one in. But they have the number one free agent. The most desirable free agent. Guys behind him on the list. It's not like, well, he's the only free agent. Guys behind him on the list. Chris Jones, Kansas City Chiefs. Kirk Cousins, who that guy never hits the market unless he's worth a ton of money. Christian Wilkins, defensive end, Clemson, Miami. You know who he is. Danielle Hunter, who leads the league in sacks.
Mm-hmm.
T. Higgins, who I covet for the Carolina Panthers. Saquon Barkley, who I previously mentioned. And every other free agent out there. All of them. They are all behind him. This is very much with great with great power comes great responsibility.
Now you're talking about language.
I was going to get there. I started botching the Spider-Man quote, and I just, no pun intended, Dennis's spidey senses started lighting up looking at me. I was going to get there. With great power comes great responsibility for the Panthers. Brian Burns is worth a ton. A ton. And you have this little, I don't want to call it get out of jail free card, but you have this tool that can help you get a ton of value for him or help you sign him, and it's called the franchise tag. So he's a free agent, but you can franchise tag him and then tell him, listen, either you're going to sign a long-term deal or you're going to have to work with us to get the most value for you. Or we will tie you up for another 2 years because you can franchise tag players twice. That's what you have. That is the tool you get to use to take advantage of the value that Brian Burns has as the most coveted player on the market, scheduled to hit the market this offseason. That is not a small bit of responsibility. It can go very, very well, or it can go very, very poorly. The Brian Burns deal could be the Herschel Walker deal of the Carolina Panthers. Remember when we traded Brian Burns and we got all those picks back and a young player? Well, look at that. 4 of them turned into franchise cornerstones. Changed our entire – I didn't want to trade Brian Burns. He was a good player, but look at us now. It could also be, hey, remember when we thought about trading Brian Burns? And then we finally found a way to get the money out of David Tepper's bank account and signed over to Brian Burns. And look at that. It's now Julius Peppers and Brian Burns, number 1 and 2, at the top of the edge rushers in Carolina history. It could also be, remember when we turned down 2 first-round picks for Brian Burns and he never turned into anything?
Mm-hmm.
It could also be, remember when we gave huge amounts of money to Brian Burns because everybody told us how awesome he was, and then for the rest of his season he didn't do much? You know, there's stories like that all over sports. One of my favorites is, right, because when we talk of the best athletes who played for one team and one team only, there's a lot of smoke to the rumors that Kobe Bryant was looking up which schools and what neighborhoods he wanted to live in Chicago. Like he was demanding a trade from the Lakers. You can go listen to all the interviews. They're out there. Guess what? Didn't happen. They chose Kobe over Shaq. He ends up staying in L.A. Now he's the patron saint of you could stay with one team your entire career. This is a slide. And by the way, I'm not saying Brian Burns is Kobe. The late, great Kobe is – he was in another level by the time he was making any trade demands, if he was, and Brian Burns is not there at all. But I'm saying this is one of those sliding doors moments. How the Panthers executed over the next 12 months leading up to the trade deadline a season from now will decide. It's one of the only things they have to dramatically improve. Will decide how long this rebuild takes.
And whomever the GM is, whether it's Fitterer or someone else that comes in, has to make sure that Brian Burns doesn't hit free agency.
If he hits free agency, it's an all-time blunder.
Exactly.
I'm usually against fans that do like the whole I'm leaving this fandom, I'm a free agent, I want to find a new team. If Brian Burns hits free agency and walks scot-free, he walks in like if he Kirk Cousins it, if he takes 2 tags and just goes, That's grounds for I'm for sale as a fan. What can you offer me?
Fan transfer portal.
There was a story like that a couple years ago where he was like a 12-year-old or whatever, and he left his team, and he wrote a letter saying, I am a free agent to the 31 other teams. Like, what can you offer me? And they actually sent him, like, you know, some swag. He got hats, and he got bumper stickers, and he got autographs.
Nice.
The fans were genuinely courting a young fan.
There you go.
If Brian Burns walks scot-free, we should all start drafting letters to the 31 other teams. Hey, I'm freely available. What can you offer me?